All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to episode 30 of I think we're episode 31 of the Blowback Roundtable. We got two very great, distinguished guests this morning. John Steppling is from Norway, live from Norway, I believe. Is that correct, John?
Yeah, I'm not from Norway, but I am in Norway. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Tony, Dr. Anthony Monteiro, he said we can call him Tony. He is in Philadelphia, South Philly or?
North Philly.
Okay, North Philly. And then, of course, Ben from Hungary is our normal co-host, and Carlo Parcelli from Washington, D.C., our other normal co-host. Thank you, everyone, for joining us and spending some time with us. Tony, I wanted to just get started with you. So every Saturday morning, you are part of this great Marxist classroom, the Saturday Free School. Could you maybe just share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah. Good morning to everybody, or good afternoon. The Saturday Free School is over 10 years old. It was started at Temple University, and it was an attempt to link the African American Studies Department there with the African American community that surrounds Temple, which is a pretty much poor working class community, poor and working class community. And Temple was this university with a lot of physical capital and mainly white students who came from places other than Philadelphia. And increasingly, the university as a whole and most of its departments was separated from the people, and certainly it was an outrage for African American studies to become this kind of professional academic department, when in fact African American studies were founded upon the struggle of the community and students, but the community made the difference, and suddenly there is no connection. So we started over 10 years ago the Saturday Free School. And we had one curriculum at that time, which was the study of things such as political economy, history, the Black struggle, Du Bois, of course, Baldwin, and so on, and it was a general thing. We left Temple about 8 years ago, and we went to a church located in the very heart of the African American working class community, a historic church known as the Church of the Advocate. And we were there about 8 years, and now we've moved from there. But our mission continues, and we believe that the political education of the people is central if there is to be any substantive movement forward. In terms of our philosophical foundations, of course, we are part of the revolutionary tradition that comes out of the 19th century in Europe, in particular Marx, and the early 20th century, the Russian Revolution. But we are also grounded in the scientific discoveries of W.E.B. Du Bois, in particular, his magnum opus, Black Reconstruction in America, which we think rethought the class struggle in the United States. And if you want, we could talk about that, which will be a topic of the upcoming Winston Symposium. But also W.E.B. Du Bois, along with Martin Luther King, who we consider, if there is to be a father of a new American people, it is rooted in Martin Luther King and his vision of a beloved community, of the struggle that must occur against the war makers, the exploiters, and the racists. And finally, James Baldwin, whose 100th birthday we will be celebrating next year, with a whole year in Philadelphia known as the Year of Baldwin. And Baldwin is this enormously significant phenomenologist and critical thinker. Sadly, not enough is known of him. But that's kind of what the free school is. We've, over the course of these 10 years, in 2018, we organized and dedicated a whole year to the 150th anniversary of the birth of W.E.B. Du Bois, the great social scientist who became probably the most famous American communist when he joined the Communist Party. We dedicated an entire year to Mahatma Gandhi's 150th birthday, and we meet every Saturday. It's on live stream, and we talk about everything from the upcoming 2024 elections to the situation in Gaza. By the way, we've paid considerable attention to the question of Zionism and the Jewish people, and how it is imperative that the Jewish people, if they are to find their way as part of humanity, break with Zionism. This will be a historic achievement on their part. We see signs of some of this happening, especially in the United States. And as you mentioned, Billy, we have our symposium coming up this weekend, and people are coming from different parts of the country. It's entitled Science and Revolution, on the 50th anniversary of the publication of Henry Winston's Strategy for a Black Agenda. So that's kind of the free school.
Thank you so much for that, Tony. Do you want to tell the audience a little more about Henry Winston? Like,
oh yeah,
I know a little bit, but I'm sure there's a lot more to learn.
Yeah, there is a lot to learn, and of course we're still learning it. We're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the publication of Strategy for a Black Agenda. It was published in 1973. Winston was from 1966 to 1986 the national chairman of the Communist Party of the United States. He was born in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Now, when you say Mississippi, to most Black people, you're talking about probably the worst place that you want to go to or be from. Mississippi was and is the poorest state in the nation. And when Winston was born, probably the most racist state, where lynching and racial terror were normal. He was born there in 1911. He and his family moved to Kansas City, Kansas, seeking better opportunity. There, when the Great Depression kicks off, he joins the unemployment councils, and he comes in contact with young people who were members of the Young Communist League. And of course, all kinds of discussions broke out about capitalism, about the Great Depression, whether there was a future for young people under capitalism. He joins the Young Communist League and quickly moves up the ranks to become its national organizational secretary. Very precocious, very, very intelligent man. He will go to the Soviet Union, to the Lenin School, to study Marxism, Leninism, a school that also hosted Ho Chi Minh and Deng Xiaoping and who knows who else, but many stellar revolutionaries of that period. He comes back to the United States. He joins the American military, a segregated armed forces, to fight against Hitler and to defend the Soviet Union and democracy. After the war, he comes back to the United States And soon after, the repressive McCarthy period is instituted by the ruling elite. He is arrested, put on trial for his speech. Let's be real, for speech and the audacity to speak and to speak publicly and to debate his ideas publicly. What were his ideas? His ideas were for democracy and peace and end to racism and for socialism. He was not a terrorist. He did not conspire to, quote unquote, overthrow the American government by force. The Communist Party was a political party. It sought political means to achieve people's power. This is a long-term project which continues today. But then he's convicted. He goes underground for several years, but then eventually surrenders himself to the authorities. He was sentenced to 8 years. He did 6 of them in Terre Haute Federal Penitentiary. But in the time that he was in prison, because of intentional neglect of the prison authorities, he lost his sight completely. When he complained, they said, well, why don't you take an aspirin? And it was the tumor, the growth, that took his sight that would eventually in 1986 take his life. But when he is released, and I think there was some kind of negotiated deal between the US authorities and the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union had somebody that the Americans wanted, and so they bargained, and Winston was released. He went to the Soviet Union, where he received treatment unsuccessfully to restore his sight. And there was a young girl, the famous story of the young Soviet girl, who said that if she could give her eyes up to Winston to allow him to see, she would readily do it. But there was no way that could happen. In the mid-60s, he returns to the United States. He is elected the chairman of the Communist Party in 1966. He had previously been the National Organizational Secretary before he was imprisoned. And this is the height of the civil rights and Black freedom movement, which we in the Free School see as a third American Revolution, incomplete as it was. And we have to remember, all of the American revolutions to this point, including the Black freedom movement, have been incomplete, which means that we have the task of a fourth, hopefully completed revolutionary process. And so in 1973, he publishes this book, Strategy for a Black Agenda, which is his attempt to update Marxism-Leninism and to anchor it as well in the history and prospect of a revolutionary class struggle in the United States. And for that scientific discovery, he turns to W.E.B. Du Bois, who had mentored him, to whom Winston's generation and peers looked up to. There was a friendship, but this book is, in my estimate, a work of scientific and revolutionary thinking. One of the most important attempts at a revolutionary synthesis in the United States. If you like, I could say more about that book, but that's Henry Winston's life. I knew him for 15 years. I worked closely with him. For those who think that revolutionaries are hard-hearted and unempathetic. He was the opposite. Having grown up in the conditions that he grew up in, he was a man of a large heart, not only a large mind, but a big heart, who cared about human suffering, who cared about the well-being of members of the Communist Party. I think he may have known everybody in the Communist Party. He was that type of organizer. And in the last analysis, I consider Winston to have been a very significant force in the revolutionary movement, in the communist movement in the United States. My estimate is that he was the greatest American communist. I can tell you why I think that if you ask me. And a huge player in the world communist movement, especially with the revolutionary and communist forces on the African continent.
I'd be interested in hearing why he was the greatest, but
yes,
I didn't want to. Did John have any comments about anything Tony said?
Well, I think that the idea of free schools is extraordinarily important right now, and it's something I've been trying to organize a bit with Johan Edibo and Hiro Yuki, all the people at the Aesthetic Resistance podcast, because I think the state of institutional education is so appalling today, and I thought it was bad 40 years ago when I decided not to go to school very long, but it has eclipsed anything from 40 years ago. I mean, I don't know what people actually learn anymore. I suppose they learn certain technical things. I'm not even sure they learn in the United States that they learn that very well. So neighborhood, community, free education, alternative education, teaching people to think, young people especially, teaching them to think critically, and correcting the revisionist histories that are out there is incredibly important. I mean, I know that we are going to inevitably segue to Gaza very quickly because it hangs like a pall over everyone. But I was reading an article that Corey Morningstar sent to me from the National Post, I guess is Canada, one of Canada's leading papers, and a journalist named Tristan Hooper. And he's very pro-Zionist, and he's an Islamophobe and a hater of all things Arab and so on. And he wrote this op-ed that is a front page op-ed, the headline of which is "No, Israel is not an apartheid state." So I thought, well, gee, that's going to be interesting fictional reading. I should pour through that. And you get into I don't know what paragraph, and he says, and it's important to point out to people, because they have this misapprehension about Israel, Palestinians and Arabs have absolutely the same rights as Israeli Jews. Now, we know that's not true.
Of course.
It takes about a 30-second Google search to prove that's not true. The Israeli politicians are on record for saying they want nothing but extermination for Palestinians. They openly advocate genocide and ethnic cleansing in the second Nabka. There was the minister of sport the other day said, "I am proud to be a fascist." I thought, well, marks for honesty, but still, the National Post, a major newspaper, publishes this patently provable bit of, revisionist history, false history, lies, and propaganda. So I mention this because because you can talk to people. You can use this as an example. If you're, a lot of people will say, well, oh, maybe Israel's going too far. And, I don't know. But those Hamas is terrible and they're all terrorists and head choppers. And you say, yeah, but the information you have is incorrect. And at bottom, I'm getting to my point, vis-a-vis Tony here. I'm sorry.
No, this is fascinating. Don't stop.
Because at bottom, if you show this to people and you say, look, this is what you are being told, and it's a lie. It's not true. It's a lie. It's dishonest. It's this is pure mendacity and it's raw. They will not care usually, because people have this capacity, it seems today, and this is lack of education again, to compartmentalize and somehow not being told lies is something that is so normalized and so expected, so anticipated today that you don't get a rise out of people. But what I try to emphasize when I engage with people on this discussion about Zionism, because also what Tony cogently said, and it's really should be the topic du jour, is Zionism has to end. As Hiroyuki Hamada, our friend, said, he wrote an article the other day that said Zionism is an arm of American imperialism. And this is absolutely true. It is a political project. It's based on a mythology about King David. That's not history, that's mythology. It's a racist colonial settler state. And this is all about, ultimately, people's tendency, propensity for apologetics about Israel at bottom is based on racism. I mean, white supremacism is something that just you can never overestimate its power and influence and effect on what used to be called the master narrative, or whatever you want to call it. But people hate Arabs, hate Muslims. They've had however many generations of indoctrination with the American propaganda apparatus, and so that's their conditioned response. And even if you say, but they are blowing up little 4-year-old girls at nursery school, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but I would disagree slightly. What we're seeing in the United States, I think, is something that could crystallize as a historic break in the 75-year history of the Jewish people since the formation of the State of Israel. And I think we have to see this 75-year period as having reconstituted what is called the Jewish people into something almost monstrous. And so what we're looking at is a considerable part of the Jewish people, especially the young, and those with a moral conscience, and those who are committed to their religion, now leading huge protests in the United States and on college campuses. What we're looking at has no precedent in the anti-war movement in this country. Even the anti-Vietnam War protests on campuses in the mid-'60s were anti-draft protests. These protests are on a much higher political and ideological level. And they're shutting down New York on a regular basis. It said that 300,000 people marched last Saturday in Washington, D.C., and it's not going to end. And the thing that I think is so important is that Jews are in the front of much of this. And this great organization, Jewish Voices for Peace, and the other one, Not in Our Name. And all of this is healthy, not only for the Jews, but for the American people, And for the Jews, like you say, John, this mythology of a chosen people and all of this, which is a way to rationalize racism and the idea that that Zionism is the liberation movement for Jewish people. All of this nonsense is being untangled, and we're seeing a new narrative come forward. That's all I would disagree with.
Yeah, no, I don't. I tend to agree with what you say. I mean, I will only make two quick observations and then let my esteemed colleagues here hold forth. One is it's always very hard to determine how big protests are, how many protests are. I remember before the invasion of Iraq, there were, tens of millions of people all over the world, and it didn't stop a fucking thing for even a heart. That's number one. But yes, it is significant. You're right. And Jewish Voices for Peace has been terrific. But I know that on Long Island, a friend went out, the pro-Palestinian protests. There were 20 people, and people were throwing stuff at them and called the police on them. And across town, there was a pro-Israeli protest with hundreds of people. This is Long Island, though, right? So certainly the global South has been mobilized in support of Palestine like never before. And my final comment, though, because this is something I think I was wrong about when I actually last time on here and on Press TV, because I thought the BRICS countries and some of the global South would see the expediency of excluding the U.S. somehow from the diplomacy required to, at the very least, bring about a ceasefire. But it's not been the case. You have Leila Khaled, the Palestinian revolutionary, said that, the Arab ruling class will always sell out their people, will always sell out the Arab working class. And Mohammed bin Salman is doing that as we speak. Now, there are Shahid Bolson would disagree with me. He just did a video, and I respect him a lot. But I'm not seeing that. The Saudi ties to the U.S. and UK are very deep, and he's allowing Israeli jets to use the airspace over Saudi Arabia, not letting other countries use it, and just the U.S. and Israel. This is what I've been told. This is what Reuters reported. So it always comes down to class. Even in this, one shouldn't reject the class analysis, because Arab leaders have a long history of ties with European colonialism, and I'm not sure that has gone away yet. That's all I have to say right now.
Yeah, I know weapons are just flying into Jordan. They're flooding into Jordan, and so these despotic ruling class in the Arab nations, they can't really be trusted for sure.
Yeah, even though the king and queen of Jordan can make these passionate speeches of looking at suffering,
and Erdogan, for that matter.
Yeah, I mean, tomorrow, not just your free school, which I wanted to go to, and by the way, the first thing, it was going around in my head as you were doing the intro. I'm sure you know this tiny singing lady who I love. She's called Mavis Staples. Does that ring a bell? That's my connection to the Black Church and the Martin Luther King, the civil rights movement in the US. And it had so much heart. And I missed that from a lot of the conversation. So much heart. But yeah, going back to your topic, Hassan Nasrallah's second speech is coming up also tomorrow. And there's also the Islamic Cooperation Summit or meeting in Riyadh also coming up. I mean, I think the famous and fantastic Pepe Escobar said that the Arab world or the Middle East or West Asia is not yet ready to stand firmly against the century of humiliation that they suffered at the hands of the US. So they're not ready to come together. But, I don't think this story has ended yet. The numbers keep going up. We see horrors every day, and public opinion, even in Russia, one of the very close connections with Israel has flipped around, not just in the region. So, Anthony, I just add it's global. It's not just in the US. Even in Hungary, where Orban is, we won't have terrorist gatherings. Yeah, we have terrorist gatherings, because we have the 13th largest Jewish population in the world. So this is a global popular. The people in the world won't stand for this. The leaders are trying to sit on multiple seats, but yeah, you're right. Something has changed, and I think dramatically. That's what I wanted to add.
Carlo, can we put you on the spot, or we can, if you had any thoughts, but I don't want to.
No, I'm perfectly content to listen at this point.
Tony, if you wanted to talk a little bit more about Henry Winston and maybe try and, explain how, learning about him can help us to better analyze what's currently going on.
Yes, and to Ben, I very much agree that this is a world political movement. It's not yet crystallized where you have a central organizing center of it, but people in their probably billions are horrified at this. Politically, leaders of countries like Jordan and Saudi Arabia cannot overlook, and Egypt cannot overlook the depth of the political alliances that ordinary people are making with the Palestinian people and against Israel. I don't think Israel has ever been this isolated. I think, if I could just make a prediction, they're going to lose in the battle for Gaza and for Gaza City. They're not prepared to fight the type of war that it will take. The Israeli public is deeply divided, almost like a civil war division in that country. Netanyahu is probably the most unpopular Israeli leader in its history. I think when you put so many of these variables together, and here I agree with you, Ben, we're on the cusp of something. And as revolutionaries, we're not, how would you say, trying to be Pollyannish about this. But as revolutionaries, we're always looking for those possibilities.
Yes.
And we have utmost faith in the capacity, whether that capacity is always realized, but in the capacity of working people, of the working classes, to struggle and fight. And, we've had a strike wave over the past summer and spring here in the United States. Very good. But that does not exhaust the capacity of the working class. And it must fight for peace if it is to fight to secure whatever economic gains it makes. So that's why we're doing Henry Winston. A lot of ways, the way I'm talking is the logic of his politics. That is to say, that he believed that a revolutionary process was possible in the United States. He defined the objective, the immediate objective of the revolutionary process was the fight against war, against imperialist wars, and thus for peace, but then the fight for democracy, at the core of which was the fight against racism and white supremacy. He believed in a broad alliance. That didn't mean every single individual, but an alliance, a critical mass of the African-American people grounded in the African-American working class and the broader working class. He believed, and I think this is accurate and so on, in the centrality of the struggle for Black freedom to the struggle for democracy and for working class unity. So we think that this thinker, barely known, hardly understood, even within what goes for the Communist Party of the United States, has insights and thinking which can be of great meaning and importance, especially to young people at this time. And what we see on the streets of the United States, what we're seeing in universities, can't be overlooked or trivialized. This is the beginning of something, but it's only a beginning. For it to fully develop, there has to be ideological clarity, a higher level of consciousness. And of course, students and young people must understand that their fate is tied up with the fate of working people in general and the Black proletariat in particular. And that's what we're going to talk about this weekend at the symposium. We're coming out, by the way, I should tell you all, that we're coming out with the journal, the first edition of our journal entitled Avant-Garde, a Journal of Peace, Democracy, and Science. We'll share it with you all, and very interesting articles, including one that I've written on Winston, some others, very interesting stuff. One on jazz and free jazz, what we call avant-garde jazz, and the article is about free jazz communism. How the jazz of that period, the avant-garde, leaned towards communism and revolutionary perspectives, and these were musicians. There's an article on Trotskyism, there's an article on civilization. So we'll get it to you. But all of this is part of the seminar this Saturday and Sunday. We in the Free School have put together a documentary on Henry Winston, which I think you will find very interesting. People who have never known him or seen him, to see this man, the way he was thinking. The other thing is his humility, his generosity, his empathy, a real revolutionary, I would say, and an exemplar of what a revolutionary has to be, not only in terms of what is in the head, but what's in the heart and the moral capacity to lead.
I'd be more interested in hearing a little bit more about. You perked me up when you said avant-garde jazz. Are we talking the Art Ensemble of Chicago, Archie Shepp, Cecil Taylor?
Oh boy!
Oh man! Yeah, you have my attention. Albert Eiler.
When I was 18 years old, I studied with Anthony Braxton.
Oh, okay. Anthony, yes, Anthony.
I was a shit musician, and Anthony was very patient with me. But that's my claim to.
We caught him every time he came to Washington. My wife and I.
Braxton's a genius,
brilliant.
Yeah.
And Philadelphia is one of those centers of the avant-garde. Archie Shepp is from here. John Coltrane, Lee Morgan. So one of the things this young woman does in the essay is try to trace the social and political foundations of Archie Shepp and others to North Philadelphia, and so on. So
yeah, that's great. That's great.
I know we can watch this.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, we shot.
Well, I was going to say, I know we can watch the Saturday Free School. It streams live on Facebook. Where else can people go to check it out, Tony?
Yes, the symposium and Free School every Saturday. You can check us out on Facebook at our site, the Saturday Free School. You can also check us out on YouTube at the Saturday Free School. And now we're on Twitter, the Saturday Free School. So we'll be live streaming. And Carla, even though the Free School is packed with young people, hey man, I'm over the hill compared to them, but packed with young people, they prefer jazz and avant-garde jazz.
That's great. Yeah, my wife is over here, and she's going. Tell them about her experience with Archie Shepp. We went to hear Archie at the One Step Down in Washington, and during between sets, the whole band came to our table and sat with us. It was a glorious night. So yeah,
Talking to you, man.
and Archie's poetry was so revolutionary and so impactful, but so woven into the music. It was a brilliant piece.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Henry Winston associated with a lot of poets. I don't know if you.
Yeah.
There's Rosalie, our unseen star of the show.
She's feeding me all this stuff.
John, I interrupted you. I'm sorry. So what
No. I was. There's a million threads to pick up on here. I think if I were to play devil's advocate at all, because I'm not. I hope everybody is right that we are pregnant for radical social change of some kind somewhere. Maybe East Asia, certainly Africa has the potential for it. We saw what is going on in Niger and Burkina Faso and sort of the legacy of Thomas Sankara there and so forth. Central and South America to some degree too. But Europe and North America, I'm much less optimistic about. And you have to remember that we just came out of the COVID lockdown years, followed by the US NATO proxy war against Russia, driven by the madness of the neocons in the Biden administration, the Rand Corporation, all of those people, all the think tanks. And
Vicky Newland. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, God. And in Norway, which was hardly the worst in terms of restrictions and lockdowns and so on, you still I couldn't drive across the border to Sweden. The prime minister was telling people how many dinner guests were allowed at Christmas. Ponder that and people went along with it without just docile. Well, people wore masks. People did all the things they were supposed to do. Now the narratives about this are unraveling. Okay. The point is really regards that, I think, is that, and Giorgio Agamben, the Italian philosopher, wrote a terrific collection. It's collected in a book, but a series of newspaper articles during that period, where he said, what happened to public debate? What happened to town hall meetings or any kind of oppositional discourse? Everybody has been silenced. Oppositional dissenting voices completely silenced. They are under threat of losing their jobs, some even arrested, for asking questions about the vaccines, asking questions about the virus, asking questions about the magnitude of these lockdowns that were destroying national economies in the United States. How many? It wiped out. It was a retail apocalypse in the US, and mom and pop stores were wiped out. And 1 in 3 will never reopen. 1 in 3 museums are closed forever, et cetera, et cetera. It was a fire sale for big corporations. They bought everything up. Okay.
Yeah, billionaire wealth tripled. Like it was a huge spike in.
Yeah. So, Adorno, who is, as most people know, one of my favorite philosophers, but one of the things he decried, especially at the end of his life, was uninformed activism, which is why education is so important. You have to. It's one thing to say they're just being really mean and they're killing all these people and they bombed the hospital, and okay, you have to understand that they are part of the political, as a political entity, They are one with the United States. They are part of U.S. imperialism. The U.S. is the country with 800 military bases around the world. Nobody else, not China, not Russia, not anybody. The United States. And they have a track record dating back, well, since the inception of the country, but certainly since World War II, the end of World War II, in which the U.S. devoted most of its foreign policy energy to destroying communism and socialism. If just the educational propaganda, the anti-communist Red Scare rhetoric has permeated education, certainly permeated media, and we are seeing a replication now with Israel, with like this op-ed piece, but it's just one example out of dozens you can see every day. So getting people to recognize something is going on is one part of it. But having them understand why this is going on, if you want social change to go further, it seems to me there has to be a second track in which education is given as much attention and energy and effort as anything else, because otherwise you are going to fail. The United States owns media. The West owns media. All platforms are based in the West with one or two exceptions. And that's very hard to fight against. And I see it with students when I teach high school special guest teaching or college. When I was in Poland at the film school, I would see it with students. They, by and large, hold very reactionary positions. And not at, the poorer schools. The working class tend to have a greater innate native intelligence than that educated 30% sort of haute bourgeoisie. But those are the people that are visible. Those are the people that control media. Those are the people that work night and day to shape the storyline for these events. And
but John,
before Anthony, I was thinking before anybody responds, maybe we could watch something. It's just under 2 minutes. I don't know if you had the chance of the latest Republican debates. Nobody cares. But one after the other, all of them said that they would deport supporters of the Hamas terrorist organization, even if they're students. They're at the point of deporting people who support Hamas or Palestine, basically, because that's what it equates to now. But this one really opened my eyes. And John, for being the devil's advocate, you have no idea how right you are. I'm completely with you. Let's listen. Let me know if you have good audio.
I can't hear it, Ben. Can you start it over and maybe just unmute it, maybe?
I will try again.
Okay.
The audio sharing is on.
Okay.
Let's do it now and go again.
And Israel is critical. And the reason it's critical is because it's a bulwark for us in the Mideast. It's almost like having an aircraft carrier in the Mideast. It's our oldest ally. It's been our ally for 75 years. It has been an incredible ally for us in terms of the technology, the exchange. And, you know, in building the Iron Dome, which we paid a lot for, has also taught us enormously about how to defend ourselves at home for missiles. So those military expenditures are all going, 75% of it goes to U.S. companies under the agreement, under the MOU. But if you look at what's happening in the Mideast now, Iran is now the closest allies to Iran are Russia and China. Iran also controls all of Venezuela's oil. Hezbollah is in Venezuela.
This is news to me.
They have propped up the Maduro regime, and so they control that oil supply. BRICS, Saudi Arabia is now joining BRICS. So those countries will control 90% of the oil in the world. If Israel disappears, the vacuum in the Mideast which is, Israel is our ambassador, it's our presence, our beachhead in the Mideast, and it gives us ears and eyes in the Mideast. It gives us intelligence, it gives us the capacity to influence affairs in the Mideast. If Israel disappeared, Russia and China would be controlling the Mideast, and they control 90% of the world's oil supply, and that would be cataclysmic for U.S. national security. So that's the answer.
Well, I was expecting more of the propaganda, but that was actually very raw, I think. Very, the quiet part out loud. What do you think? And I think Anthony wanted to respond to it.
Well, I think Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is making a pathetic, how would you say, clown of himself. I mean, he goes around talking about his uncle, John F. Kennedy's peace speech in 1963, which is a great speech. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr., ends up like this. He announced that he was running as an independent in Philadelphia, and we went there. But we went there skeptically because we knew what his position on Israel and Zionism is. And so, but it's pathetic. It's really pathetic. And the American people are passing the politicians by. Believe me, whether we can consolidate here, I agree with John. I mean, it's going to take ideological clarity, the struggle of ideas, the informing of people. We're in Philadelphia, but Philadelphia is not insignificant in the political configuration of the United States. It's the 5th largest city, but it's the poorest city. Todd Doherty and one of his colleagues just came here. And he hadn't been in Philadelphia. I don't think he's ever been here. And he was overwhelmed at the poverty that he sees in the city. The reason I mention it is that it is not just the war in Gaza. It is the war in Gaza connected to the poverty, which is a form of class war against the people. When these things are connected, and of course the students don't yet know how to do that. The young Palestinians and young Jewish people who are leading these protests and organizing them, they don't yet know that. But who among us have known it all? We have to learn it, and that's why we're there. I mean, and believe me, we're a part of Philadelphia. We're part of the ideological life of the city. We're not just a group of people meeting on Saturday. We meet, in fact, we meet all during the week, satellite reading groups and study groups and activist groups. But this is where we are. We had, by the way, I'll just say this. We talked about a triad of opposition: Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Cornel West, and Donald Trump. And we
look at them now.
No, well, we don't know yet. It is still a very dynamic situation. In fact, this is before October 7th. So the three of them took a totally opposite position to the neocons on Ukraine, which was very important because at that point, if you look back, it was Ukraine that could have been the trigger to a wider war in Europe and a wider world war. Now we have this widening situation of the Middle East and Eastern Europe. So the people, I think, are more advanced than the politicians. And I think we're at a point where the people will make the difference. Let me put it this way, can make the difference.
Yeah.
A lot has to be done. A lot of work has to be done. But we have to put our noses to the grindstone and do that work. And I think the most important work, and I agree with Adorno, action without theory without direction, without purpose, spontaneous action will never carry the day. And that's why you have institutions like the Free School. And our work is primarily among young people and also in the Black working class.
Yeah, I think I think the pedagogy. We're trying to organize this series of seminars that would become like a people's university. No, I think you also made another point worth underlining, and that is that the United States economy is dependent on the military, is dependent on defense, and American police departments hire ex-soldiers more than anybody else, soldiers that are trained in counterinsurgency, not in actual domestic policing. Loke Wowequant, I can never pronounce his name, a French writer, has a book, Punishing the Poor. It's probably 20 years old now, but it's a brilliant book, really very good book, about the nature of U.S. police departments, the criminal justice system, the prison system. I mean, we all know the statistics. I would hope at this point that you don't have to go over them. My son is, you can Google him actually. Lex Steppling is an activist, works out of Los Angeles, and has extraordinary stories. I mean, he's had some victories, but the corruption in the criminal justice system, the racism in the criminal is is staggering. One needs to be reminded about this pretty often. And this was part of Israel's brand, was invincibility and technical expertise, and they were the best fighters, the best trained, the best weapons, everything that Israel touched was the best. And that brand is tarnished now. I think I said that last time, forever. I mean, that was a cottage industry. Israeli police train American police all the time. Lots of money is spent on this by American police departments, and so those kinds of things, that because everything, perception management is the optimal phrase right now. The reason people get funded or not funded all has to do with perception, not with reality. And the reality is the U.S. military is kind of in shambles. They're running out of supplies. They weren't able to do anything they wanted to do in Ukraine. They were defeated in Syria. They left Afghanistan. Now they're quite happy to make money. The Defense Department makes money no matter what. They're death merchants, and so they're happy with that. But these were failures. These were still not the expected outcome that they had hoped for, and that may be true here too. I don't see that Israel does not want a ground invasion against Hamas. They'll be destroyed, and Netanyahu can't afford the kind of casualties that Israel would incur from a ground invasion. They're scared about what Hezbollah is going to do. They're worried about what Iran is going to do. I'm not particularly, I mean, I am, but I'm not particularly concerned about like World War III or something, because I don't think it can get to that short of something hugely unexpected. But I think there is, the shifting tectonic plates of global, ideological forces are shifting, and it's very hard to, there's a de-dollarization movement. There's the BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, et cetera, the Belt and Road Initiative, and on and on and on. These things are hard to read and predict, but certainly something is going on. I agree with that. I'm not sure I agree that that people are nearly educated enough to make smart decisions right now. But we shall see.
Can I just add a couple of points? Because not just on screen, but in real life, I find myself just between the two of you. The revolutionary optimism from Tony and the kind of, I guess it's a Hungarian trait, but, you know, historic defeatism that we have here, that John portrays. And on that point, I mean, obviously there's still like 2 carrier groups, 72 ships. The big military is being flaunted all over the Middle East, and don't you step out because we're still the big kahuna. But on the other hand, I have seen very good examples of US and Israel trying things and it just not working. I mean, the propaganda is getting desperate and defensive. I mean, just this week, a lot of Israelis, thousands, signed an open letter to the Knesset, to the parliament, saying we demand an investigation into 10/7, the events of October 7, because it was based on 3 or 4 lies that have all been ripped apart through time, just basically ripped apart. You know, you've heard the beheaded babies, the rapes, all of that is just gone now. And the other one was Barcelona. God bless the dock workers of Barcelona who refused to load any boat that goes either to Ukraine or to Israel. So the people realized that they actually have the power to stop this death machine. It is something I really haven't seen, not even during Ukraine. And that was so far the most propagandized war. So I see the hope that Tony sees, but I also see, a lot of this has happened before, and fuck, they got away with it. And just the last little point, you mentioned apartheid, and someone wrote that article that this is not it. Well, there are videos of the South African people, the white South Africans, now fighting in Israel and going to kill the brownies, and absolutely openly saying it. So come on, you need any more than that. So I see that as well. So I just wanted to add some decor to what you have been discussing, but I'm really enjoying the duo here.
And
Barcelona thing is significant. I'll just say that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Mossad, having linked up with the CIA for so long, has spent so much of its capital that you end up with situations like Colombia, which has broken diplomatic relations with Israel over this.
Yeah.
Colombia, of all countries, of course, they now have a center-left president, but still, it's very radical. In my mind, over my experience, it's a very radical move. It's unprecedented.
Just to get a few more small items of current events in here, and then John's next. Okay, I wanted to say that Paraguay, which is the last sort of ally of so-called Taiwan, has now opened to investment to China. So they see that's changing. That was always the reflexive, U.S. vote at the UN. That was Paraguay. And second, this fucking CIA big honcho, who is the current one? He landed in Egypt.
Burns.
Burns.
Bill Burns. He landed in Egypt, and hey, you guys should sort of manage Gaza after the war with Israel, and they said no. And the other one was diplomatic, like private things, but it got leaked. Sent private messages to President Biden saying, "We, the leaders of Arab countries, we have lost the Arab public opinion for at least a couple of generations."
Wow.
That I thought that was enormously significant. That we can play this game. Final thing, this was in the Atlantic Council. Can you think of more Atlanticist outlet last week, where they said, well, this reminds us a little bit of 1956 and the poorer neighbors, which is Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon. If we actually turn our backs on them, others could pay their debt because there's Russia and there's China. And think about 1956, and they're talking about the Suez Crisis, and the Soviet Union jumped in to finish that that beautiful dam. I'm blanking on it right now. And we could do the same. So let's pay them off. And it turns out it didn't work. Not with Jordan, not with Egypt. This payoff scheme. I think Netanyahu also said, "We'll cancel." I don't know how he has the authority, but we'll cancel all your debt at the World Bank if you agree to just take in all the Gaza Palestinians. Just some current events.
I would just, and John or Ben, just one other country I would mention.
Yes.
Turkey. This is, I think, quite significant. I'm one of these people that believes in a lot of ways that what you see among leaders is often based upon what the leaders see in their own people. this is a tremendous time. And you talk about Colombia, you talk about Bolivia, you talk about South Africa, these, and of course, Saudi Arabia is not sitting on the fence and is not allied with Israel. We don't know completely how it's going to end up. But I would say geopolitically, we're looking at something very different than even a year ago. And I think the defeat, imminent defeat in Ukraine is very, very important. And I would say all of this might be conspiring to bring the Biden administration down. And I don't shy away from saying it. We have to defeat them. This administration must be defeated. And whatever it takes, this is the most warlike administration probably in American history. I don't rule out Third World War and even nuclear exchanges. They're talking too much about it. This Israeli minister, and they're talking about North Korea and using nuclear weapons and placing nuclear weapons all over the place. It might not happen, but we cannot rule it out, and we must, as part of the political education of the American people, raise this threat. The struggle for the Palestinian people must be connected to the struggle against nuclear war, against the military-industrial complex, and to defeat the Biden administration and the neocons that are running it.
Hear, hear.
Well, I don't disagree with any of that, and trust me, I am not blasé about the number of nuclear weapons out there in the world, and administrations like the one in Tel Aviv. I mean, these are fanatics. These are crazy people. We talked about it. Ben Gvir and Yoav Gallant and I mean, when Miko Peled, who was always very circumspect, he's an Israeli. His father was a general. He became a peace activist. When he begins to sound worried, and when he actually comes out and says Zionism has to end, you can't have a racially pure colonial project like it. When somebody like that, he would not have said that 10 years ago. You have to sit up and pay attention. There's no question. And Colombia and these different countries, that minister in Spain said Netanyahu should be in the dock at the criminal court. And there have been a lot of statements, even Erdogan. We'll see what happens. And we talked last time about who's going to run for president from the two war parties. I'm still saying Michelle Obama, and for the Republicans, DeSantis probably. But it is such a clown show now that But this is the other thing. This is sort of my final comment because I can hear my kids downstairs. Is the crisis in the U.S. of homelessness, poverty, inequality, the fact that the U.S. still has the largest per capita and in real numbers prison population in the world, among the worst prison conditions in the world, absolute racial inequality in the entire policing system and the judicial system, shocking numbers. Anybody who has had any experience with it, I have, knows the reality. The homeless thing and the general inequality and poverty is looming as a crisis nobody wants to talk about, along with the infrastructure. It's dire. It's really dire. And it's going to get worse. And just because media doesn't cover it doesn't mean it's going away. I think you're going to see a lot more problems with this. And look, I'm just writing a piece today on the sort of the psychological landscape in the US. How many mass shootings? 2 a week? now, something like this. It's
Ridiculous
just
number.
talk about normalization. It's entered the jargon of American culture now. All the memes on mass shooting, the number of people on antidepressants, the number of people clinically depressed, the unemployment figures that they lie about. It's a raw, unhealthy, and desperate, lonely, disaffected population.
Yeah.
And that's not sustainable.
Yeah, but see, they're not.
Go ahead, Anthony.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ben.
I just wanted to make a quick observation. Something, it's kind of a joke on the internet right now, that one thing that is in common in the USA and India, sorry for the brave Indian comrades in Kerala, out of all places out there, that Modi, when he had the G20 summit in Delhi, he kind of cleaned up the place, meaning all those barrios, all those, they were sent out of town. And look, everything looks good on camera in this angle. And apparently that's the same thing being done to San Francisco right now, because Xi Jinping has been confirmed to visit the, Atlantic.
Another quick, almost 40,000 Americans have died from gun violence already this year.
Yeah.
Jesus.
That's just staggering, man.
What other country? No other country on earth has that.
Yeah.
No, it's testimony to the collective madness. This won't go away. This will eventually come back to cost the
people are not unmindful of this crisis. And it's such. It's not viewed as pathology, which in some ways you could say it is, as much as it is being viewed as a systemic crisis. And I beg to differ, John. It's not going to be Michelle Obama and DeSantis.
Who's it going to be?
It's going to be Trump and Biden. They can't get Biden out of there. They have nowhere to go.
Well, I'll watch that.
And they think, some of them think that they can win with him. They can't win. And it's not about him or his age or his early stages of dementia or any of that. I think the big issue is that people feel that his economic policies have worsened their economic conditions, including impoverishment, and they are connecting, I think for the first time, maybe since 1968, a foreign policy issue, in this case, Gaza, is going to be a part of the election. Very contradictory, but I would say this, a very fluid political situation where, according to polls, 22% of African Americans are saying they're going to vote for Trump.
Yeah.
This is not to be, listen, for Black folk to say they're going to not vote for a Democrat, given their loyalty to FDR, to John F. Kennedy, to Barack Obama, is huge. The discontent.
I have to go, gentlemen. I have twins staring me down here. So,
John, thank you so much. I'm going to remove you from the stage to make it easy, but we really appreciate your time. So we'll have you back.
It was great to get to chat with you, Tony. My genuine pleasure, and all of you as well. We'll talk soon.
Enjoy family time.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
And you have Yusuf Salem in New York, one of the Keating Five. Keating Five. One of the Central Park Five, who spent 7 years in prison, is now a councilman in New York City. And Trump, when that was taking place, took out a full-page ad in the New York Times saying he wanted to see those kids executed.
Right.
Executed.
Right.
And they were innocent. And even after they were innocent, he said they should still stay in prison.
Yeah. Trump is
what kind of mindset is that?
Flawed.
Oh my God.
Listen, Carlo, we have not had a Martin Luther King since Martin Luther King. You understand?
Yeah.
Obama was the biggest disappointment in my life when it comes to U.S. history.
But very controlled. But Trump is very flawed. There's no question about it. but he's a vessel for something. When people, no, we can't listen. We're not talking about the way we feel. We're talking about a objective understanding of the political crisis in the United States. And the ruling elite sees this Cornel West, Robert F. Kennedy, the Libertarian, all of this independence, and then Trump, who can't be deterred no matter how many indictments, and then this movement of black voters away from the Democratic Party. We're on the cusp of a political realignment in this country, and Trump or JF or Robert F. Kennedy or none of them are the authors of this. It is the discontent of the people, and that's what we have to pay attention to.
Yeah.
You know, I was hoping that RFK Jr. would perform better, but he's weak ideologically.
That's why I wanted to play that. I was so shocked.
Yeah, very shocking. Cornel is my friend, and you know I'm a champion of his, but he misunderstands what fascism is. He said Trump is a neo-fascist thug and Biden is a milquetoast liberal. Well, let's look at it. When do you separate fascism from war? And Biden has given us nothing but war.
Mm-hmm.
So we take what we can get, but at the same time, I think keeping the focus upon the masses of people. The only thing, or the main thing I think that Biden is going to run on is that he upholds democracy against the fascist Trump. Yeah.
Yeah, good luck with winning that. Before, I don't want to get too bogged down, but the economic aspect I think is equally important, because the last little vassal, which is the EU, is right now exporting bed bugs to the world. It's absolutely sinking and freezing at the same time. While in the US, like the 33 trillion debt, just to service that, right, is over $1 trillion a year. It's over the military budget, and that means $200 million every hour. I mean, Dmitry Peskov, the spokesperson for Vladimir Putin, says you're going to run out of paper to print that money on before anything else. That's the major effect locally of the Biden administration.
Yeah, and I think the economic crisis in Europe is more severe than here for the time being. Yeah. But we're not out of the woods in this country. The working people are anxious and angry at this Biden administration, believe me.
Tony, when you were talking about, Carlo, I want to get you right back in. But Tony, while you were talking about, getting the Biden regime out of there, my thought was, well, everybody else running is going to have the exact same, cabinet behind them. And I didn't know who you were talking about. But when you said Trump, like that, I understood that, because Trump definitely represents a difference. But Biden, to me, DeSantis and Biden, they're similar. Like there's very little difference.
I agree with that.
in their foreign policies. Especially.
Vivek is the same, right? To me.
Yeah, no. There's how many Democrats and Republicans that have thrown their hat in the ring, and they all have. They're no different than Biden. They would be a change of face. But Trump does represent a difference, and Cornel West, to a certain extent, represents a difference. Yes. But that's very controversial, Tony.
No, it is. Yeah. And I'm prepared to take a victory lap when it's all said and done. I remember when this Ukraine thing started kicking off, that Noam Chomsky, no friend of Donald Trump, made the statement that Donald Trump was the only major political leader in the West that showed any opposition to the proxy war in Ukraine, and so on. I mean, you got to give the devil his due. He's not a messiah. He's not Martin Luther King. He's not a great leader in the sense of what a visionary leader, but he is an astute politician. And the people see him coming under attack by a government and by institutions that the people don't like. And they say, why are they dragging this guy through the courts? Why are they doing this on the cusp of an election, a presidential election? And they're saying if they hate him that much, there's probably something to be said for him. And, you know, I know among black folk are, I just can't express it to you. Know, let me just say a quick thing. You know, because all politics is local, if you don't know who you're dealing with, where you live, you need to get out of the game. In Philadelphia, we just had a mayoral election. A black woman won and will be the first black woman mayor, the first woman as well mayor of the city of Philadelphia. 75% or more of black voters, registered voters, did not come out to vote. That is the depth of the anger.
And they didn't even come out to vote for a black woman because she probably didn't say anything that resonated with them, is my assumption.
That's part of it, and a distaste and disgust for the entire black political class. They're looking for a stick to beat the entrenched establishment with. And if that is Trump, many will embrace it. Most will not vote, which means that the state of Pennsylvania cannot be won by Biden if black folk in Philadelphia do not come out in adequate numbers. This is real politics. Why? The question is, why are black people who have been so loyal to a fault to the Democratic Party, why are they starting to break with the Democratic Party? And it's more than Biden. Locally, it's the black political class who we do not like. You know, so I mean, people usually talk about angry white voters. They haven't yet met a black voter in Philadelphia. You're talking about anger.
That's learning the Obama lesson. That's what I'd say. Very, very good to hear. Especially that I'm not the one saying it from the outside. It's great to hear this from you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And there's another thing, another aspect that ties the economic and the politics that's happening around here. And I've informed Ben and Billy Bob about it.
Oh,
is
yeah.
The FBI headquarters, which was downtown. If you've ever been around it, it's hemmed in on all sides. It wants to move to Greenbelt, Maryland, which is about 5 miles from where I live, in Prince George's County. Now, we live in a majority black county, and so a lot of economics is going to follow them up here when they bring all these white Mormons who are FBI agents up to our little county up here. And so this John Warner, the senator from Virginia, has now he's requested an investigation into why this is happening, because they want all that money to go to Virginia, to Springfield, Virginia, so the contest is that the Greenbelt, where they want to put it, is formerly a Franklin Delano Roosevelt all white community that over the years has of course become integrated and so on and so forth. But the housing there is not suitable for FBI salaries. So that it's interesting because the minute there's an attempt to sort of improve the lot of people in my county, then there's somebody else that'll rise up and want to take away the largesse that would follow it. Now, we have Goddard Space Flight Center and a good piece of the Department of Agriculture up here, but this is a whole new game. This would be a big game changer, but I would guarantee that now that Warner has stepped in, it's probably not going to happen. And the boon.
He wants
what's
that
interesting
FBI
about
money up in his state.
this is the kicker. I don't know if you guys pay much attention to this, but 7, I think it might be 8 of the richest counties in the United States are around Washington, D.C.,
Yeah.
because everyone goes to the trough. And Prince George's County, where we are now, is the richest African American county in the country, and but still, we don't have that kind of clout, that kind of sway, that this stuff isn't constantly snatched out from under us, and we remain basically underdeveloped compared to the rest of the counties, especially the Beltway bandits in Northern Virginia. Those kind of places, the places that have been recently where hundreds of guys, hundreds of people have been caught using Asian prostitutes in this huge prostitution sting over there. So, but anyway, I'm getting a little off base, but I just wanted to throw that out there. I for one don't really want the FBI here, frankly, to be quite honest. It'll drive housing prices, values up, and my property tax will go through the roof again, because we're getting gentrification now, because we have 2 subway stops and that sort of thing. So I would wish they'd go somewhere else, frankly, but a lot of people would benefit, and I don't think it'll happen. So.
Tony, I identify as one of those people that could never bring myself to vote for Trump. But I mean, I get a lot of pushback. It's a very divisive issue, but I absolutely agree with you. And I know a lot of people are disappointed for me to say that. I don't understand how people think Biden is not as bad as Trump. Like that's confusing to me. But very, very divisive issue. I'm getting a lot of pushback in the chat.
Yeah, I see one of them. Yeah, but isn't that what comes with the territory? We're not. I don't think any of us are running for political office or trying to win a popularity contest. We're trying to discover the truth. We're trying to understand the political processes occurring in the country. One thing we do know, that the majority of American people feel that the ruling class of this country is unfit to rule.
Absolutely.
This is very important. Much of that morphs or congeals under the banner of the Trump movement. This is not the Republican Party. This is not an election of Republicans versus Democrats. It's an election of a movement against a ruling elite. Now you say, well, it's not the Russian Revolution. They don't have the Bolshevik. No, this is not what we're looking at. But we're looking at something unprecedented in American history. Maybe if you go back to 1854, 1860, maybe. But we don't know this. This type of disenchantment, this type of alienation, you don't have it in Europe. The opposition to the ruling elite is more acute here, perhaps, than any country in the world, certainly any major capitalist country. This country is also the largest economy and the largest military in the world. If the people oppose the elite, that will have to affect what they are able to do militarily, what they are able to fund in terms of military support, with people in Seattle, Washington, or in Philadelphia saying, well, the money we were getting during COVID is being cut off. Now, what are we going to do? We can't afford food. Our children are not eating the way they should. Things are being defunded and so on. Like Martin Luther King said, the bombs that are dropped in Vietnam explode in Detroit and Philadelphia and other places. This is a historic crisis. You see what I'm saying, Billy Bob? And that is where I begin. A crisis. How this crisis will be played out, we cannot predict. And then the unexpected, this youth and student movement around Gaza. That came out of nowhere. And it's huge and it's significant. We don't know the outcome, but I think we have to lay down certain principles. One, to defeat the main war makers in this country, and they are the Biden administration and they are in the Democratic Party. This is not your father and grandfather's Democratic Party. This is a whole new ball game.
I'd like to.
I'm sorry.
Go on, Tony.
Forgive me.
No,
I want
just
to add that maybe you said Europe is distant or slightly different, but there are big changes here. And I think they need to suffer a little bit more. But even like leading German politicians are saying we need to get rid of the Yanks. They need to get back home. I think it was Severin Dugleden who went out of the Die Linke, the left party. Obviously, Hungary is the bad boy of Europe, but we had these little grouping of NATO ambassadors saying how we don't like what Hungary is doing because we shook hands with Putin, then there's Slovakia as well. And increasingly, Nancy Pelosi said that Hungary doesn't belong in the Europe. And pretty much the response, I'm paraphrasing it, was, who the fuck are you? You know, proud European. Then Jeffrey Pyatt, the guy on the recorded conversation with Victoria Nuland, you know, when they decided who's going to be the leader of Ukraine, said, there's this LNG pipe that Russia is building in the Arctic, and we're going to strangle that. We're going to kill that. And most people say, who are these people to tell us what to do? There's big on the part of the people, definitely, but increasingly on some voices high in the previously bought and paid for comprador leadership of Europe is beginning to revolt. I mean, you just got to get past this winter to see. I don't think this place is settled at all.
I agree with
so
you.
This is global in dimensions, in magnitude, not just the US.
There's two dimensions to this: there's domestic and the international. And on the domestic side, there are people who have worked for decades to get to the point of Donald Trump, to get to the point where you could have a Donald Trump as this kind of figurehead. You got the Koch brothers. Only one of them died. There are four brothers. Two of them were involved in ALEC and all of this domestic manipulation, where you in local politics, you put your people in, and then you build up to Congress. Now there's dozens of these people, Steve Bannon acolytes in the Congress. This guy Johnson, who's just been named Speaker of the House, is one of those nut bars. On the one level, he's nutty as the day is long, racist as the day is long, manipulative as the day is long, and on the other hand, he's someone who is in a position of authority and can kind of make a rational converse rationally.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Daniel, question. If all of this is true, and probably it is, the question is, what is to be done? What do we do?
Well,
Lenin's words.
What do we do? Well, personally, I don't think Trump has. Look, let me give you an example. When Bolton was in close to Trump, in the cabinet, when he wasn't in the cabinet, I think was he National Security Advisor. Yeah. Trump was. They were talking about Venezuela, and Bolton wanted to invade Venezuela, and Trump didn't want to do it basically until Bolton said, "Look, well, Venezuela has the world's largest or second largest deposit of oil in the world," and then Trump said, "Oh, we have to invade them." I mean, the guy is not. He's not really running the show anymore than Biden is running the show. It's a bunch of people behind him.
Carlo,
we're all disappointed that he didn't clear this.
What is to be done?
What is to be done?
Of millions of people.
I think what is to be done. I kind of agree with what you're saying, but maybe in a more irrational sense.
Okay.
I think we should just let it. We just got to let it collapse in on itself, and
an
then
accelerationist.
Work with the rubble that's left. I don't think there's anybody that can catch it in flight and correct its course. I on any side. I think it really. I hate to say this, but has to base just completely implode.
See, and I guess, and so Billy and Ben and Carla, we're back to Henry Winston and the symposium this week. You know, I think
Full circle.
Yeah, full circle. Yeah, I think that you know, I might seem to be naive, too optimistic, not skeptical or critical enough, but I don't think so. I think that any revolutionary, and by revolutionary, I'm not talking about anything all that extraordinary. I don't think that any revolutionary can sit back and say, let it collapse, and I'm waiting for it to collapse. This is a time where action can be taken. The ideological crisis of the state is so great. We have opportunities, and we must take advantage of them. Sure, none of us has, you know, 1 million people that we can call into the streets and follow us on a revolutionary platform. But, you know, this idea far from equilibrium dynamics, the butterfly effect, in this situation, small movements can make huge differences. If I could use the Russian Revolution as an example, when Lenin came back on a train supplied by the Germans who were at war with Russia, which was a risk, when he came back to Russia, there wasn't much of a Bolshevik party, but he always believed, and I think he was right about this, ideas can decide the outcomes of political events. We're at such a time. It's not going to happen immediately, but the crisis is unbelievable. I wouldn't wait. I don't think we should wait for the whole thing to collapse and then try to build from the ruins. I think we have something to say about how the crisis is resolved. That's all I would say.
Yeah.
Ideas can change results. I would have made that the title of today's show. I think that's what it should have been. Thank you.
Yeah, Tony, you've been with us a whole hour and 40 minutes. We really appreciate your time. I wish you all the luck in the symposium this weekend. It sounds awesome. I would have liked to have come. I know a lot of my Facebook friends are attending. So, you know, all the best in that regard. You know, we could really continue this conversation for several hours without any, you know, conclusion. But I just want to thank everybody. Ben, did you want to say anything? And then Carlo, definitely you can say.
No, I really enjoyed the exchange well, especially the optimism we see here. And yeah, I didn't want to add anything that the ideas can shape outcomes. So really, that's the title drop, and we should have used that if we knew somehow that this was going to be the conversation.
I just want to say it's heartening that young people are willing to listen to avant-garde jazz.
Hey,
very heartening.
On that note, thank you, everybody. Thanks, Tony, again. Thanks, John, for coming by, and we'll be back on Tuesday for episode 32. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.